Hello, everybody, and welcome to Black Mesa East. Black Mesa East, a secret resistance research base in the world of Half-Life 2. We have just said goodbye to Dog, who has opened the path towards Ravenholm. Ravenholm. And against the advice of Eli Vance, who warned us not to travel through Ravenholm, it is now the only choice available to Gordon Freeman. This is going to be a playthrough of the Ravenholm level of Half-Life 2. And I'm doing this because it is October, and it has become somewhat of a tradition on this channel. Yeah, those head crabs are ugly. Ugly little monsters. It has become somewhat of a tradition to do some spooky themed videos in October. This year, not every video is going to be, October themed. We don't go to Ravenholm. And for good reason. But yeah, I want to do a handful of more seasonal videos, more spooky videos. So, a playthrough of the most horror-themed level of Half-Life 2 seemed appropriate. And this is my first time addressing this month's theme. The first video I did to celebrate October was a little Nosferatu roleplay video. And I don't know all the stuff that I have planned for the month at the moment, but I have some ideas, so we'll see what the rest of the month brings. And also, I should mention that I just finished working out a few minutes ago, and I have just enough time to record a video before I have to take off and do some other things today, so I'm feeling slightly out of breath, slightly dehydrated, perhaps. So I apologize if that changes the listening experience at all. I have a pretty busy week. One of my best friends is getting married, and of course course, we have the saw blades here, which are an iconic part of the Ravenholm mission. They make you rely pretty heavily on your gravity gun. You do find ammo as well, and you can use your guns, but ammo is sparse enough that it does encourage you to get creative with your gravity gun. And we also have traps set up around Ravenholm, installed by some mysterious figure that we will perhaps meet soon enough. But I am the best man in the wedding, and part of the wedding party, so I am getting a specific suit to fit the theme, and there's been a lot of reordering stuff, going to the tailor, all sorts of nonsense that I've been taking care of, and I've mostly gotten through it all, but I do have a few more things to handle. I always have trouble with clothes, honestly, in general, but especially formal clothes. I don't think it's unusual, but, for people to not get on well with off-the-rack clothes, but I feel that I definitely don't get on well with them. So, usually takes a lot of modifications to make things fit my weird, gangly body. But yeah, it's very exciting to get ready for the wedding, which is this weekend. But it is also a lot of work, so I will be taking care of some more errands related to that after I finish recording this video. Here we have Father Grigori, and he is a priest of some kind, some sort of religious leader. I'm not entirely sure what religion he is supposed to, represent or be a member of. If I had to guess, I would say he's probably Eastern Orthodox, but I wouldn't necessarily put money on it. When you see his church later, it has those sort of bulb-shaped, architectural features on the top. And we're somewhere in Eastern Europe in the context of this game. But I don't believe his religion is ever super specified. He is a Christian. He wears a cross, crucifix around his neck. But this is one of the best maps, or missions rather, together in Half-Life 2, in my opinion. Ravenholm is just wonderfully designed. As I mentioned, it encourages you to use your gravity gun a lot. And they provide enough, a variety of types of objects that you can use as weapons. There's, of course, the saw blades that can cut zombies in half, but occasionally will leave the head crabs alive. And then you have the explosive barrels, which cause deadly explosions and can also create fire. And then you have little propane tank objects that do not cause immediately deadly explosions, but do set things on fire, so the zombies will still be a threat for a time as they walk around ablaze, but they will die eventually. And then, of course, you have just your regular old blunt force objects, cinder blocks and wardrobes and all sorts of stuff like that you can use to bowl over zombies. And the design of this map is great, and the environmental design. Things like this, where you can see Grigori's past actions, right? He speared head crabs on meat hooks. He has a zombie trapped in a fire cage, which is kind of gruesome. And speaking of which, it's worth noting that a lot of the horror of this comes from how well designed the head crab zombies are. Struggling to hop onto that ladder. I just need to press X to latch onto it. But yeah, the zombies, first off, look fantastic. They're very disturbing, bloody, but more even than their design, or at least equally as important, is their sound design. The noises that they make. It is deeply horrifying and upsetting to listen to the human-like noises that the zombies make. I'll probably have the audio playing quietly during this gameplay. But really, you just need to look it up, at full volume, to appreciate just how disturbing the noises of the zombies are, especially when they are set on fire. The vibe that it gives is sort of like the human is, still alive, still conscious in the zombie. They're just being puppeted by the head crab. And so, as you are burning the zombie, it gives a sense of guilt, I guess. A a sense that you are not just killing a mindless zombie, but you're inflicting pain on a human being. And it's very grim, very dark. As I said, just very upsetting. And given the context of what, it's depicting these parasitic alien creatures that hijack the bodies of people and turn them into killing machines, the horror is appropriate. But yeah, the zombie design, both visual and auditory, is the foundation upon which the effectiveness of this level resides. You need the zombies to be scary and disturbing, and the thing about these zombies is, even if they don't really frighten you directly, I've played this game enough at this point that these zombies don't really scare me, despite them certainly being pretty horrifying. Even if they don't scare you per se, as I said, just the horror of them conceptually, the noises they make, the humanity that you sort of detect in their cries of pain. I find that as sharply uncomfortable now as I did, the first day that I played this level. But of course there is more to this level than just the zombies. Although they are pretty freaky still, honestly. Especially, I don't know, just the way that they move, the fast ones in particular. And the toxic head crabs. The way they skitter around. I don't have arachnophobia, but they do kind of give me the creeps, especially that part in the mine shaft later on. I'll call it out when we get to the end of the level. But they're really freaky. So, there is more to Ravenholm than just the zombies, of course. The environmental design is fantastic. The maze-like, claustrophobic quality of navigating through the town. Frequently going into dense, packed interiors, right, with narrow hallways and barricades that are blocking your path, and all that sort of stuff. You compare it to a lot of the other levels in this game that are not trying to be horrifying, right? Root canal or whatever. And, those involve lots of wide open spaces. Even when you're indoors, they tend to be sort of spacious rooms with, lots of space to move around and seek cover and all that. Not so in Ravenholm. There are tight hallways everywhere you look. And that is a very effective design choice for heightening the tension and the fear, especially because the zombies are melee enemies. enemies, they have to hit you up in your face, and so if you have wide open spaces, it becomes very easy for the player to avoid ever being hit by the zombies, and it will quickly make them, non-threatening. But when you put a bunch of them in these narrow hallways, cramped corridors, and then put, some of them are hidden in closets, some of them are lying on the ground appearing to be dead at first. Sometimes you have barricades and physical obstacles that kind of block the path that you might try to escape down. All of those level design choices contribute to the feeling of claustrophobia, to the fear, to making sure that you're actually taking damage and making you feel kind of panicky. And add on top of that the explosives that sometimes fill these rooms, which might blow up and, damage you. I love that when you pick up a paint can and shoot a zombie, or hurl it at a zombie, it coats them in paint. You can also throw the paint cans at walls and stuff, and it'll do the same. I've talked before about how Valve does a great job at making the world feel real by making you feel like you can interact with the world, right? That you can shoot the wall and bullet holes will appear. That you can touch objects in the environment and knock them off tables. That you can throw a paint can and paint will splatter on whatever you hit. The narcissistic injury that I have talked about before of Gabe Newell, where he said that when a player tries to interact with the world and it doesn't work, the player receives a narcissistic injury. You don't receive many narcissistic injuries in Valve games. And so that covers the gameplay of the level design, how the gameplay encourages the tension and the fear. But of course, the design choices on a sort of aesthetic level are also very effective. Of course, we're being attacked by the fast-moving, jumping zombies now, introducing a new enemy type. There's Grigori's church. And the new zombie enemy type is important for escalating the gameplay tension, right? We've been navigating Ravenholm so far, dealing with slow zombies, and so the threat has mostly come from being forced into close quarters with the zombies and being outnumbered by them. But you could usually hit the zombies very easily, or sorry, I'm trying to grab this propane tank and I keep grabbing chunks of cardboard box instead, and it is not good, and I just took a lot of unnecessary damage because of that. So, just as you're starting to get zombies and the head crabs and the environmental hazards of Ravenholm. They introduce these fast zombies to ratchet up the threat levels and give you a type of zombie that you might actually miss when you're trying to shoot at because they're so fast. And now boom, you're wasting ammo, right? And we also get introduced to this zombie type, the sort of host carrier zombie that throws the poison head crabs at you. So this level nicely demonstrates how to kind of slowly ratchet up tension, right? It's one of the things that Valve is very good at, how they layer things on top of each other. In this case, the lesson is heightened by the fact that it is a horror-themed level. But it's really just an extension of their general game design principles, right? So, Valve normally, they work on an assumption that, look at that lighting, a rectangle of light. Let's try to give this guy a dignified end. Let's cover his body up. But yeah, in regular gameplay design, Valve is very good at introducing a concept to you in a controlled environment, giving you one or two opportunities to prove that you understand it, then slowly building on that concept until you can integrate it fully into regular gameplay where you're dealing with, all the considerations of gameplay, like enemies attacking you and whatever. And in Ravenholm, they do this, they implement this concept with the zombies, right, and the horror elements of it as well. So you're introduced to these slow zombies, and you have to use the gravity gun and environmental objects to help fight them off. And then, just as you're starting to get comfortable with that, they start to layer more things on. So they layer on greater numbers, they layer on more difficult environments, and then finally they layer on much more difficult enemy types. The fast zombies. And of course the poison head crabs themselves are, a new threat, which can instantly reduce your health to 1. And obviously that, puts you in a very dangerous position where if you take 1 hit, 1 point of damage from anything, you will die. So it makes them a very terrifying enemy, even though they themselves are not super dangerous, right? They don't do a ton of damage to you, because your health will slowly regenerate what you lost. So it would be hard for a poison head crab to kill you on its own. But the debuff that it applies to you is so potent that it will, put you at risk for death. I don't really remember what I'm supposed to do here. Also, I just got hit by one of those little guys. But you can see my health slowly starting to come back. I'll just mop up some zombies while I figure out what the next step is. I have to get over there. There's that little platform. I think that moves and I can jump over. I don't know. Yeah, so anyway, that's kind of the gameplay of Ravenholm, and obviously then you start to layer on all of the aesthetic design here, right? The corpses everywhere and the hanging bodies and the darkness, right? The moon and the sky and the clouds and the shadows and the fires lighting the streets. Creates a good horror environment aesthetically, so that's an important part of contributing to the vibes here. Is there a lever around here? How do I get that thing to move? What am I missing? What am I missing? I'm a little lost. Just shoot some zombies, I guess. But yeah, this level also demonstrates. I've talked a lot already about how, you're using the gravity gun pretty heavily here. And that gameplay element is a great example of how Valve keeps this game interesting over the course of all of its missions. And the way that they do that is by varying the gameplay. So if you just had to wander around and shoot enemies for all of Half-Life 2, it might get a little boring. But Valve switches up the levels, right? So you'll have one level where you're driving around on the buggy, and another where you're on the boat, but they aren't right next to each other. They split up the vehicle levels, right? And then, you'll have levels where you have lots of guns and ammo and can just light people up left and right. But then you also have levels like this where you're forced to scavenge more and to use the gravity gun more and to use the environment more to your advantage. So the variety of gameplay styles that Valve encourages is pretty potent as well. It helps keep the gameplay fresh, even without creating, wildly new mechanics for you to interact with. They don't have to create some whole new gameplay system. They just, put you in a situation where suddenly you don't have ammo, and now you have to handle things more creatively. Also, I don't know if that's what I was supposed to do, but it worked, so I guess that's fine. But I genuinely don't remember. I think there was a puzzle there that I completely missed. But yeah, Ravenholm, I think, is kind of a famous mission for very good reason. There's lots of good Half-Life levels, and, they're all memorable in their own way, but I do think if you ask people to think of 3 levels from Half-Life. Ravenholm is gonna be in those 3 levels. You know, in one of those 3 levels for the majority of people. It's just very distinct, very totally different, and they just handle it super well. They land the concept perfectly. And importantly, it also doesn't overstay its welcome. That's an important thing with games. With movies too, with anything really that, you know, you might get a good concept, you might have a good idea, but then if you just ram that idea into the ground repeatedly over and over and over again, people will inevitably get bored. And Valve, I think for the most part, knows that it's better to end something early and leave the audience wanting more than it is to go for too long and leave the audience sick. I recently played RoboCop, the RoboCop video game, Rogue City, and that's kind of how I felt about that game. I did quite enjoy it, but at a certain point, in my opinion, it just it was going on too long, and I think it would have benefited to just end like 5 to 10 hours earlier. I will be doing a video on that game, I think, because it's a pretty fun one. But yeah, maybe maybe like Root Canal goes on a little too long in this. That boat starts to get a little long in the tooth, maybe, but for the most part, I think you Valve comes up with a new gameplay concept, a new environment, whatever it might be, and then they play it out for a bit, and then before you get sick of it, they've moved on to something else. These fast zombies are pretty freaky. You know, people talk about what zombie apocalypse would be like, easier or harder to live in. So obviously you have, the Walking Dead universe, and that's a really easy one to survive in. I guess obviously in the Walking Dead universe, people are like killing each other all the time. So that's kind of tough, but in terms of actually surviving the zombies, if we're all being honest, right? Slow, shambling zombies are really not very threatening. There's some risk to them, no doubt, but I think any of us, if we had time to live in that world for a little bit, we would pretty quickly develop the skills necessary to not get killed by slow, shambling zombies. But then they compare it to like 28 days later type zombies, the rage virus. And, that's zombie apocalypse hard mode, right? You're kind of screwed if you end up in the 28 days later zombie universe. The Half-Life universe, I think, would also be a pretty bad one. I mean, obviously you have the Combine going on, but if we just imagine there's no combine, but we have head crabs, right? I think the tricky thing with head crabs is they're small and they're sneaky, right? They could get into your attic, they could be in your vents, right? They can sort of sneak around and get the drop on you. It makes it a lot harder to kind of fortify your house or your base. And then, of course, that's not even getting into the actual zombies. And they're slow and shambling, which isn't too scary. Although they do like to chuck big rocks and stuff, right? They like to smack things at you at high speeds, which could be pretty dangerous. But you have the fast zombies, the sprinters, and they can jump from roof to roof and climb rapidly, and that's just kind of terrifying. I don't know if it's more or less scary than 28 Days Later zombies. I think it might be a bit more scary, to be honest. But anyway, here we are with Grigori. He has his cross necklace there, and his red Converse, which I've always found very funny. He has his sort of vestments on, I guess, and then he's got his kicks, his red kicks, his little Converse all laced up. And he's a pretty iconic character, looking after his flock. The kind of religiously maddened old priest in the zombie apocalypse who still sees the zombies as his parishioners, right? And he has to put them to rest. He's a cool character. And it's fun too. It's very satisfying to get to this moment in the mission because it looks like Ravenholm is some factory town maybe, or at least they have one big factory in it. It's very satisfying to get to this part of the mission because you've been seeing Grigori the whole time and interacting with his traps and, interacting with him from a distance, and so when you actually get here and now fight side by side with him, it's a pretty satisfying conclusion. And as I said before, kind of ties back into that idea of Valve introducing the new concept, letting you deal with it for a while. So they added the fast zombies and the host zombies, and they made you deal with that for a short time. But then before too long, they know, alright, we have to keep things moving along, and so they introduce you to Grigori in person, and now you're fighting alongside him. And it becomes a sort of duo shoot-'em-up section of the mission, which is tonally a nice change of pace with what you've been doing the whole time. So, I think the level is kind of a masterclass in how to design a level. They keep adding the new ideas right as you're just getting used to the previous ideas. And then, when they run out of ideas or just at a certain point of development, they say, okay, we're going to end the level there. So you get this kind of slow, steady ramp up of tension and mechanics until you reach the end of the level. And then it becomes kind of a palate cleanser. At the end of the level, things get much more simple again after you're done with Grigori. And then when you see the Combine again, it's almost like a breath of fresh air. You're like, oh, I've missed you. I've been in the dark, fighting zombies for 45 minutes. And now I'm in a bright sunny day, and a Combine soldier is shooting a shotgun at me. And it's a gift. So, we have kind of everything that we have interacted with over the course of the level now all introduced at once. We have a headless statue here in the cemetery. Or I guess the graveyard if it's attached to the church. And yeah, you get looks like a monk. You get all the stuff that you've been playing with this mission all at once. You get explosive barrels and saw blades and fire and your shotgun and all the different types of zombies and Grigori on top of all that. So it's a great culmination of all the individual components of the mission. I don't know if I should even have the audio for this game. These zombies' screams are just so horrifying. So uncomfortable to listen to. Yeah, just very disturbing. And I do believe there is a somewhat disturbing element of Half-Life 2, and I think it's with the zombie bodies or something. They have scanned in as a model for one of the corpses an actual human dead body from real life. Like they didn't just create a model from their imagination or from, some basic reference material. They copied an actual corpse. Okay, I gotta be honest, I had actually no idea that Grigori could die. I thought that he was immortal. Interesting. He has a lot of health, I guess, because I don't think I've ever experienced that happening before. But I'm just wandering around for an ASMR video, kind of being chill, not rushing through the mission, and just letting him get munched on by zombies. Yeah, so it's kind of disturbing and probably unethical, because from my understanding, there was no permission or anything like that. I think they just took this guy's corpse and put it in the game. But I don't know the details for sure on that, so if there was permission given, then of course that's okay. I mean, you can have a different conversation about whether that's maybe too far, I don't know, but obviously if permission was given, then it's not really an issue. yeah, I don't know the details super well. It's just something that I've, heard in reference to Half-Life 2 is the human corpse in the game, that it was a real life body. So, despite my dying, this isn't really that hard of a part, or at least it shouldn't be, because Grigori is mowing people down and you have lots of resources at your disposal. The saw blades are always very satisfying to use. The fact that they just cut the zombies in half. It's kind of like Dead Space. Oh my god. I threw it and Father Grigori just walked right in front of me as I threw it. Is there any health pack somewhere, or am I just... Should I just kill myself and respawn? These head crabs. One head crab could kill me now. That's all, I'm on death's door. My life is hanging by a thread. By a thread. Some tanks of propane or something there. Father Grigori raises the fence for us so we can go through. But he stays behind. He must attend to his flock. So he runs over to that little mausoleum and kaboom, kaboom. The fire consumes him. Although he seems rather unbothered by it. And then he runs into the mausoleum and seems to take cover. Don't come for me. You're supposed to be chasing down Grigori. So, it leaves it kind of ambiguous as to whether Father Grigori dies or not. In the sort of gameplay world, you do just see him mowing down zombies, and he's not actually in the fire in the mausoleum, so it seems like he could very well survive. But from a sort of dramatic narrative perspective, it also feels very appropriate that he dies here, exploding in the fire in his graveyard, taking down as many of his former flock with him as he can. We have a little elevated perspective on the graveyard. You can see the whole path that we walked through. And now we can continue on into the mine shaft. So we walk through this little building. We have that graffiti that I talked about in an earlier video. And the shaft over here, so whatever mechanisms were once suspended there are long rotted away, but we can carefully drop down the broken beams. And this is the part that I was referring to earlier when I said that it was kind of freaky, those fast head crabs. I mean, just look at them down there, the way that they're just skittering around so fast. They're like freaky little spiders. running around. Those little supply crates are they're such like a dopamine hit when you play Half-Life for a while. Finding those supply crates, it's like, oh, the little goodie crates. It always feels so good to zap them open, break them with your crowbar, smash them with your gravity gun. Alright. Let's get messy with these head crabs. Start blowing them up with these barrels. Clear the field a little bit. It's extra freaky when they're on fire running around like that. Just these burning little balls of demon death. So, sorry, I hear somebody in my kitchen. I think I need to pause for a second here. My roommate got home. I thought I had enough time before they did, but that's okay. They're very polite, and I just asked for 10 more minutes to finish, so we'll just get out of the caves here. And, oh, you know what? There's a little audio piece, a little music cue, shortly after this that we will go until because it's really nice. The composer of Half-Life 2 is Kelly Bailey. He did an absolutely phenomenal job with his compositions for this game. I think this game has a wonderful soundtrack. It's very distinct to Half-Life. It's this kind of understated electronic style that I really, really enjoy, and I think it goes very nicely with the slightly grim, lifeless world of Half-Life 2. Which is not to say that Kelly Bailey's music is lifeless, but rather that he just composes in a way that's, no, get out of my way, oh my god. That zombie blocked my path, and I ended up sliced in half. Gordon Freeman's journey brought to an abrupt end. But yeah, I think Kelly Bailey's score for Half-Life just has it dances from kind of tonal world to world, sometimes reflecting the more science fiction nature of Half-Life, sometimes reflecting the more grim, gray sadness of the world. And of course also when it's time for a really dope fight sequence, he composes some awesome piece of, really pump up music to accentuate the fight and just feel very intense and exciting. So I really can't speak highly enough about Kelly Bailey's score for this game. And I say all that because there's a part very shortly where a little snippet of music called Triage at Dawn plays. There's a fast one. Of course, we're out of Ravenholm, but naturally the zombies are not bound by township borders. It's also one of those funny moments, right, where we're in Ravenholm and the moon is high in the sky. It looks like it's, 1 a.m. or something. And then we go through that mine shaft and we come out here and suddenly it looks like, 6 or 7 a.m. Just one of those little video game things, right? You hide the artifice of what you're doing. Usually the player will never notice. So we have these snipers here. I'm just gonna tank this. Sprint up to it. Does a lot of damage. And out he goes. There's another thing they talked about in the Half-Life documentary. I think that I'm reminded of from watching that sniper Fallout, and it is, I might be slightly misremembering, but I believe they talk about how certain times they modify the physics of objects, make things act in a sort of unrealistic way to achieve a certain effect. So if I'm not making this up, I think that they make those snipers fall faster out of the windows. And I think they do that at various points in the game. Like make things heavier than they should be, to give some sort of effect. I forget exactly what the point was. I think probably for dramatic effect. You see the Combine soldiers like plummeting off of rooftops and stuff. It makes it more impactful and exciting. I do highly recommend that Half-Life documentary. Also, Triage at Dawn should start right here, yeah. It's playing now. Maybe I'll just speak softly here and maybe try to raise the volume a little bit. Although with the talking, maybe I'll try to paste in the clean audio of Triage at Dawn. Anyway, it's just, it's only like a 45-second little clip of music or something like that, and yet it's just so evocative and moody, very atmospheric. It creates just the right emotional tenor for what's going on. So, I think that will be our trip through Ravenholm today. We are now safely through. We've met up with the resistance. So that ends our little horror excursion. So happy October, happy season of ghosts and ghouls and goblins. And thank you for joining me as we took a terrifying trip through Ravenholm. Until next time, my friends, please take care of yourselves, and I will do the same.